September 23, 1933. Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. A concession agreement opens the Saudi desert to an American oil company searching for something that may not even exist. The company is Standard Oil of California, and the decision will eventually help transform Saudi Arabia's economy and reshape the global oil industry. At the time, there is no modern Saudi oil empire. There are no giant production facilities, no global pipelines, and no Saudi Aramco as the world knows it today. There is only a vast desert, a geological mystery, and a risky agreement between a young kingdom and an American company. Exploration begins in Saudi Arabia's eastern province, and in 1935, drilling starts. The early results are disappointing. Wells are drilled, money is spent, and commercial oil remains out of reach. Then, in 1937, company executives turn to chief geologist Max Steinecke. His advice is simple: keep drilling. The decision matters. In March 1938, at Dammam Well No. 7, commercial quantities of oil finally begin to flow. The well later becomes known as the Prosperity Well. What follows is not an overnight transformation. It is the beginning of an industrial system that will grow across the kingdom. In 1939, Saudi Arabia begins exporting oil. In 1944, the California Arabian Standard Oil Company is renamed the Arabian American Oil Company, or Aramco. After the Second World War, production expands rapidly. By 1949, Aramco is producing about 500,000 barrels of crude oil per day. In 1950, the company completes the Trans-Arabian Pipeline, stretching about 1,212 kilometers from eastern Saudi Arabia toward the Mediterranean. The pipeline changes the economics of exporting Saudi oil to Europe. Then another discovery expands the scale of the story. In 1951, Aramco discovers the Safaniyah field in the Arabian Gulf, which Aramco describes as the world's largest offshore oil field discovered at that time. By 1958, crude oil production exceeds 1 million barrels per day. By 1962, cumulative production reaches 5 billion barrels. The oil beneath Saudi Arabia is no longer simply a geological resource. It is becoming the foundation of a national economy. But another transformation is approaching. During the 1970s, the Saudi government begins increasing its ownership in Aramco. In 1973, the government acquires a 25% interest. 1 year later, that share rises to 60%. Then, in 1980, Saudi Arabia increases its participation to 100%. 8 years later, in 1988, the Saudi Arabian Oil Company, known as Saudi Aramco, is officially established. The shift is more than a change in ownership. It marks the transition from a company operating under an American concession to a Saudi-controlled national oil company with a much larger role. The numbers help explain why. In 1971, average crude production had already reached about 4.49 million barrels per day. By then, Saudi oil was no longer only a domestic resource. It had become part of the world's economic infrastructure. Countries depended on energy supplies. Industries depended on stable oil markets. Transportation, manufacturing, electricity, and global trade were increasingly connected to petroleum. That gave Saudi Arabia something few countries possessed at the same scale: enormous influence over an essential resource. Aramco also continued changing. It expanded beyond simply producing and exporting crude oil, building pipelines, refineries, gas systems, international partnerships, and chemical operations. The company increasingly became an integrated energy enterprise. And Saudi Arabia's relationship with oil became deeper still. Oil revenues helped finance infrastructure, public services, industrial development, and the rapid modernization of the kingdom. But the power created by oil also came with a difficult reality. The country's wealth became closely connected to a commodity whose price could rise and fall dramatically. Global recessions, wars, production decisions, and changing energy demand could all affect the value of that resource. This made control over production and energy policy strategically important. Saudi Aramco eventually became one of the most valuable and influential energy companies on Earth. Its story began with a concession agreement and a few explorers crossing the desert. It continued through years of failed drilling, the discovery of Dammam No. 7, massive production growth, and the gradual transfer of ownership to the Saudi government. The company that emerged was no longer simply an oil producer. It became a central pillar of Saudi Arabia's economic power and a major player in the global energy system. Today, Aramco describes itself as a leading international energy and chemicals company, with operations extending far beyond its original oil fields. But the most important part of its history remains the moment when a risky search beneath the Saudi desert produced commercial oil. Because once that oil began to flow, the balance of economic power in Saudi Arabia began to change forever. And the story of that power began with one well, Dammam No.